Welcome to the Informed Pregnancy and Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, pregnancy-focused chiropractor, Dr. Elliot Berlin. My guest today is a creative director and product designer. Today, we're going to talk about her recent pregnancy where the baby would just not stop doing somersaults while she was trying to have a vaginal birth after cesarean. Isabelle Kosciusko, welcome to the podcast.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Great to see you again. Well, for everybody else to hear you for the first time, but congratulations, you have your baby.
Thank you. Yes, it's been 7 weeks today. So
Wow. Happy
something of a
birthday.
birth. Yeah.
Yeah,
Haven't got
wonderful.
the candles out just yet, but yeah, maybe
This
later.
was not a simple story. So if we go back a little bit just to get an idea of who you are, where are you from and what do you do?
Yeah, so my mom's American, but I'm French. I grew up in France until I was about 18. Then I moved to England for 18 years. Met my current husband. We moved over just before COVID. And yeah, here we are in Los Angeles now. We've been here since 2019. We started trying to have a baby pretty much very soon into our relationship. And I've got a toddler who's 2.5 and a newborn of 7 weeks.
7 weeks. Wasn't the easiest journey for you. I would
No.
say along the way you had some.
Yeah, I definitely feel like my friend was saying, like, oh, you have this card stacked against you a little bit, especially in this last pregnancy with having a vaginal birth. So we started pretty much immediately trying to have a baby, but we weren't really paying too much attention. And then about a year and a half into our relationship, I had an ectopic pregnancy. I found out I was pregnant. It's kind of a long story, but I'll shorten it. I found out I was pregnant at I had the 7 week, 8 week visit the day after I got insurance in the US. So found out it was an ectopic pregnancy and was advised to go straight to the emergency. And yeah, so that was that. That happened a couple of months later, had an HSG, found out I had a hydrosalpinx on the side that wasn't the ectopic actually. And so my doctor recommended that I get my tubes removed. So at least one, if not both. So I ended up doing that in December that year. And then obviously without tubes, needed to do IVF. So I did 2 rounds of IVF and was very lucky actually. That was very, a fairly as straightforward as IVF can be, I suppose, journey. And then I got pregnant in late 2021 with my firstborn daughter.
First of all, why 2 rounds of IVF?
2 rounds because we kind of thought we wanted 2 kids, and I had one embryo. Yeah, I did the genetic testing just because I was 38 at the time. So I kept being told advanced maternal age, advanced maternal age. So yeah, I just figured it would save me some heartache. And yeah, I did 2 rounds, got 3 PGS tested embryos, figured that was enough and I could always just go back and do more if needed after. But, they both took and, so have 2 kids from 2 embryos.
All right. So then the next step is getting pregnant.
Yeah, so the next step, I gave myself the summer off actually, and there's another thing. So just after I had my second round of IVF, I had a checkup with my IVF doctor who was really amazing, Dr. Brower, and she said actually you need to get a myomectomy just to be on the super safe side. So that happened. Then I gave myself this summer off. I just wanted to go out. I feel like I'd been so sort of like IVF, it takes over everything in your life. And I was like, you know what? I need a breather. I just need to go and have some fun and just like, do whatever I feel like for a couple of months. I was also going back to Europe to see my friends and family. So came back and did the first, got pregnant basically in October that year. So that was 2021.
So
Yeah.
that came fairly easy.
Yeah, obviously IVF is a whole crazy journey, but I was very lucky in terms of how many healthy embryos I got from each round. And also the pregnancy happened, straight away. Like it didn't take multiple takes for it to land. And I had a pretty healthy, easy pregnancy. I'd say both times for the majority of the duration, but especially my first one. Honestly, I was ecstatic to be pregnant. I was really embracing it. I was reading all the books. I was doing all the, research into baby brains and like what they feel and think in the womb and just all these things. I really embraced it, honestly, in a way that I wouldn't have had my journey been easier. So in a way, I am not just in a way grateful with how it happened. If I'd got pregnant after a month of trying, I wouldn't have the appreciation that I have for everything, and I wouldn't have embraced pregnancy the way I did.
From the books that you read or the other research that you did, does anything stand out as being particularly helpful?
I mean, there was a book that I particularly remember. I think it was a guy called David Chamberlain. I might be wrong, but it was a book written in the 70s about how babies can feel and hear what you feel and, the music you play and things like that in the womb. I'll find it and
We can put it in the show notes. I'm not sure which book that is, but along those lines, we have a film streaming on Informed Pregnancy Plus called Prenatal Memory, which is a doctor
yes.
from Japan who, kind of realized that he's an OB from Japan. He realized while he's talking to people about their care, about the pregnancy, about the baby, that the baby's also listening and kind of shifted to also address the baby.
Yeah, I watched that in my second pregnancy actually, because I think you recommended it to me and I watched it. It's so fascinating. I'm always just curious about, what happens in their minds, what happens to them in the womb. And that was really insightful. You see all these little children who have all these prenatal memories. It's pretty magical.
Yeah, so that was helpful for you. What was your plan going to your first birth after you did all that research?
Yes, so I hired a doula. I did hypnobirthing. I really wanted to have a vaginal birth. So I did also Britta Bushnell's birth course in person. I read that, her Transform by Birth book. And yeah, did Hypnobaby's birth course. I was doing Hypnobabies with our doula, who was a hypnobirthing specialist, quote unquote. And yeah, that was my prep. I really wanted a vaginal birth. I just felt like because I was 39 at the time, I was just being pressured. And because of my journey, I felt just pressured into having a birth at hospital. Yeah, so that was my idea. I'm going to have a hospital birth, but it's going to be as intervention-less as I can make it. Yeah, just not rely on, not take an epidural, obviously not have a C-section, not have an induction, just avoid any of those hospital interventions as much as possible.
Well, how did things start
Yeah.
off?
I was just containing my laughter after I said that because obviously that's not how it happened. And,
Well, we already spilled the
fate,
beans that you went for a VBAC, so
yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah, well, fate did not want that for me. So, yeah, what happened is I was getting pressured by my doctor, who I would say is a very traditional doctor. She's on the slightly younger side. She's probably younger than I am. So she was saying, well, as a lot of doctors do, saying you need to get induced at 39 weeks, which I pushed back. I was saying, 40 weeks. And then I said, look, I'll be comfortable getting induced at 40 plus 5, thinking that'll give me plenty of time. What happened is at 40 plus 2, I went in and also they were giving me a lot of fetal monitoring. And that was kind of my way of keeping him at bay. I was just like, okay, cool, I'll come in and I'll have a checkup and you can put me on the fetal monitor and fine. You
okay.
know,
So, like, if you do it on stress tests, essentially, they'll buy a few days of
that's it.
confidence.
I was just like, yeah, like not even for me. It was more for them. I was doing it because I
Right,
was.
I could hear that in your like,
Yeah. And I was just, walking very confidently into the office. What happened is, and it's actually funny, my husband was all for it. By the time I was 40 weeks, his work were saying, like, yeah, don't come in because we don't really want you here. We'll just get you replaced. I was still working because I was just like, whatever, this baby's going to come when she wants to come. It was a girl. And yeah, I went in at 40 plus 2, literally left my lunch. I was still on my laptop, left my lunch on the table. My husband drove me to hospital and I was like, okay, see you in 5 minutes or, half an hour, whatever. And then I go on the heart monitoring machine. And then my doctor came in and she said, oh, so you've got fetal D cells actually. So yeah, she looked at me. She didn't look very happy. And she was saying, look, normally we induce people at this point, which was not what I wanted to hear, not what I expected to hear. I didn't really know how to deal with that because no one had really told me about fetal D cells before. So I called my doula, who was kind of not really helpful. And then I just decided I wasn't going to be very comfortable going home when I've been told that my baby's
baby's
in
in
distress.
danger.
And I was like, well, I could wait 3 more days and get induced in 3 days, but am I going to sleep, at this point? And I was like, no, I'm not going to be able to rest. I'm not going to be able to relax and, put my feet up and watch TV, right? Well, when you're like, well, maybe my baby's in distress in there, but I don't really know. So I decided to get induced with a balloon. Yeah, just a balloon at that point, which didn't really go well. It didn't really happen.
Meaning it didn't create any dilation or it
Didn't
took,
create any dilation. I told them to put it up to the max. She was like, normally people put it at 65%. And I was just so trying to be hero. I was like, it's fine, carry on. And she was like, wow, 80%. Like, you missed out on pain pretty well. And my husband said he walked in the room and he was like, are you okay? And he could see me like gripping the sides of the bed. And I was like, but anyway, yeah, it didn't really do anything. The baby was still in distress, like intermittently in distress, and nothing, no dilation, nothing. And I was also really choosing not to have an epidural. That was quite important to me. So I did that for about 12 hours, got admitted to labor and delivery. So I was in there for about 12 hours. And then at 3 in the morning, I remember just being in agony and going like, I need to have an epidural. So got that done during the night. The next day, still no progress. Nothing was happening, which was quite disheartening every time. They come in and they tell you, no, still like maybe 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters, maybe three. My doctor came in about 24 hours later and said, look, if you want, I can break your waters, which we did. And then just carried on. And again, they just kept coming in and turning me over and telling me the baby was in distress, so they had to turn me over. I was trying to do my hypno babies course at this point, my hypno birthing course. Oh, the other thing is my doula, when I messaged her to say I was going to labor and delivery, she told me, okay, I'm going for a nap, keep me posted, which at the time I was kind of wondering, like, why? Like, surely now is the time that you should be showing up. But I
hmm.
had so much going on that I didn't really pay attention. I was just like, okay, I guess she knows what she's doing. Yeah, so fast forward to the next day, she hasn't come. The nurses kept asking me, where's your doula? Where's your doula? And I was like, I don't know. She's supposed to come, but she's not here. My husband was dealing with her. So I was just trying to focus on, breathing and trying to work through this. Yeah, no progress. Even after the waters broke, it was getting a little bit better. It was going up to maybe like 3 or 4, but it was kind of like maybe 36 hours at that point.
It's so stressful.
It was,
I've been
yeah.
feeling stressed.
It was disheartening more than
Uh,
anything. It was just disheartening. It was so far from the experience. I think I thought I was also really flexible because everything I'd been told before was, prepare for the unexpected. Like you think you're going to be prepared, but you're not. So just be flexible and resilient. And I thought I was, but I really wasn't. I think I was very attached to what I wanted, which was
hmm.
a vaginal birth in hospital with no, medication or anything.
Well, here we are 36 hours into it. You are in the
Yeah.
hospital, but you're getting all sorts of interventions and medications, and things are still not moving all that quickly. Why don't we take a little break? When we come back, we'll find out what happened at the end of that birth. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking to Isabelle Kosciusko, and guess what? We're 36 hours into what's supposed to be an unmedicated birth and a vaginal birth at the hospital, but it just started with some fetal decelerations during monitoring that concerned the doctor and then concerned the mother because the doctor was concerned, and then landed in the hospital and tried a few different induction things. Nothing really seems to be creating a lot of progress, or sounds a little bit like your uterus is in neutral, contracting a lot, but not really driving
So
forward.
I was getting contractions and I was on the Pitocin at that point too, but it just wasn't progressing. And that was disheartening. I just kept getting fetal decels, but I was still thinking it might happen. The doula still wasn't there. Just all
The
the things.
doula after 36 hours.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. One of the nurses, I think this is before actually I took the epidural, when the nurses, I was just in so much pain. And one of the nurses was saying, picture your happy place. And like I was on this birth ball and I was bouncing up and down. And she was like, where's your happy place? And I was like, on a beach in Mexico, on a beach. And she was like making me bounce up and down, like going on a beach in, which I think that, yeah, to an outsider would have been like pretty funny to see. But yeah, so fast forward to 36 hours, it's still not happening, still fetal decels during the night. I will say, because I was getting checked through the night, one of the nurses came in. This is like maybe at 6 a.m. the second night. So maybe about 40 hours into this, she checked me and she was like, oh, you're almost there. You're at 8 centimeters. And I was like, Oh my God, all of a sudden, I just had this moment of like, I didn't go through all this for nothing, but I felt also quite a lot of pain from one of the visits during the night that night. I started feeling pain again, and I was like, okay, maybe it's just the intensity of the contractions because I've progressed more. So I just took it on board, but it was very painful. And she was telling me I was 8 centimeters, and I was super happy. And, just thinking, this is it. This is it. Like 42 hours in, it's fine. It's going to work out my way. And then the doctor came in at 9 a.m. to check me, and she's like, "You're not at 8 centimeters. You're at
No,
like 4 or 5. If
no.
Yeah, I guess it's possible that you retract." But it was like, I don't know what she's on, but she did not tell you the right figure. And also, what is this wire hanging out? And
Oh,
it turned out one of the nurses had accidentally unplugged my epidural, which was like, oh, that explains why all of a sudden I started feeling
oh
really
my
pain.
gosh. But I
So,
mean, it's, I guess, a little funny, but not funny funny. It's just like a comedy of errors. And still, where's your
yeah.
doula?
Yeah, my doula showed up at 9 a.m. that morning as I was being told by the doctor, like, you need to consider a cesarean at this point because it's been almost 48 hours and 24 hours since your waters broke. And honestly, I was just defeated at that point. My doula came in. I just wanted to cry. I just felt so defeated and exhausted. And I asked for a little moment on my own, and the doula was saying, look, let's do some spinning babies exercises. But honestly, having her there actually was more triggering than anything else. I just wanted her to leave because I was angry with her for not coming earlier. It took me months to speak to her and ask her what happened. But regardless, I just felt like at that point I didn't really have a choice. Yeah, so I just took a moment to myself and, spent like an hour or half an hour just crying basically on my own in the room because I'd asked everyone to get out. And yeah, just decided to say, okay, I just felt like that was all I could do. And also, to be fair, what I wanted was a healthy baby. So after 2 days of fetal decels and all that, I was just like, you know what, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I think I was particularly attached to a vaginal birth in retrospect because of doing IVF. I felt like I really wanted one thing that had less medical intervention.
I hear that a
I
lot.
think that was an important component for me. But, it didn't happen. I was slightly traumatized after. I think people I know have like very happy C-sections. Honestly, I felt like someone was like pounding like really hard on my chest. My husband said it was funny because he was there and he was holding my hand. Like it was just crazy because they pulled the baby out and then they were like, "Do you want to cut the cord? Do you want to take a photo?" And he was like, "Look, I feel like my wife is about to die." Like there was a lot of blood. He was a little bit traumatized and they were so used to it that they were just kind of treating it very matter of fact in a good sense. Probably a good thing because it means they're so used to it that they do it very well. But yeah, for us, it was very like, what is going on? It just felt completely crazy.
Oh, sorry you had such a challenging experience. It takes a lot of strength sometimes to let go of your dream and do, even though you want that healthy baby. It's hard to let go and to even accept that that's what's healthiest for your baby.
Mm.
It sounds
Well,
like you didn't have a lot of support that you had planned for, and then also just sometimes, even right out of the gate, you don't get the experience you want. And it's a flow chart. I say this on the podcast all the time. Page one is that birth that you dreamed of and envisioned, and the last page probably is the one that you got. But it's still part of the plan. The plan is, if your baby needs to, or you need to have a cesarean birth, then of course you're going to do it. Doesn't mean it's a great experience. So after that
mhm.
birth experience, how soon till you decided to have a second?
Yeah, so after that, we waited about a year and a half. In fact, exactly a year and a half. And at the beginning of last year, I was thinking, look, I don't want to wait until I'm too much older. Like I'm 42 or I was 41. I don't really want to have kids too late because I still want to have more energy, etc. And I thought it's this year or nothing. Should I do it? Should I not? Also, it felt like a year where as much as having a toddler is tiring, it felt manageable to have another kid and I didn't want to leave too much age difference between them. So early last year, I started thinking about it again and yeah, got pregnant in April. So, waited a couple of months and then, yeah, just used
Embryo
it.
did its thing.
Yeah, exactly. The embryo did its thing and got pregnant in April. And different pregnancy in that the first trimester, I felt extremely nauseous, very tired. I felt like the first pregnancy was a little easier to manage the first trimester. But besides that, I still swam a lot. I was obviously very happy. I was very much less focused, as I'm sure everyone is in their second pregnancy because you're dealing with a child already. I would find myself, whereas my first pregnancy, I was like, I'm 12 weeks and 3 days, and like knowing every week what size my baby was. This pregnancy, I was kind of like, what week am I again? Like just trying to keep track. So it was very different in that sense. But besides that, very happy, very, yeah, healthy pregnancy, just less time to focus on it, I suppose.
I mean, after you have a cesarean birth, you have, I guess, two options to plan for a repeat cesarean or vaginal birth after cesarean. Had you put thought into that?
Yes. So ignorance is bliss. I didn't know VBACs are such a big deal. I just thought that's what everyone does. You just opt for a vaginal birth. And then if it doesn't work out, you have a cesarean, which I thought is what the majority of people do. I didn't really realize it was a thing. I think my doctor asked me, so do you want another C-section or do you want a VBAC? And I was like, oh, of course, yeah, I want a VBAC. And then I think at 32 weeks, I came to see you just because I swam a lot and I felt like my joints were quite stiff. My back was very tense. So I came to see you for a chiropractic visit. And at that point, the baby was breech, but I wasn't concerned because it was just 32 weeks. I felt like more and more people go, oh, okay, you want a VBAC. I remember you told me about episodes to listen to and, how to prep. And I was just kind of like, do you need to prep for this? Is there such a thing as, do you need to read up about it? Why is this a big deal? And the more I looked into it, the more I realized like looking at the figures was quite alarming. I think it's like 1 in 10, can't remember what it is, but it's a very low rate of people who go for VBACs
Right, it's
compared to
interesting. It's a low rate of people who go for it and a high success rate among those who do.
right. And I was just really confused and honestly quite shocked. And all of a sudden, I kind of went down this rabbit hole of like, why is this such a big deal? And then my doctor also increasingly started talking to me about the risks and everything that could go wrong. And, basically every time I would go for a visit from about 31 weeks onwards, I feel like I would get told, which was from, every 4 weeks to every week at a certain point, you get told about risk of uterine rupture and like all the various other things, but mainly that one, where I ended up feeling like the way it was being talked about was like, you've got a 1% chance of dying, and if this happens, and she told me one of my friends had this happen to her and it very nearly killed her. And yeah, which is obviously, not what you want to hear. Yeah. So I was trying to mitigate like feeling anxious about it whilst trying to inform myself for the best possible birth. But every time I would read more about it, I would get more figures that are, not heartwarming or, yeah, just confusing.
Now, at 32 weeks, breach is not a huge deal, but it's definitely a time to start tracking it, put your finger on the pulse of it. Even from that perspective, how did things go?
So, yes, that's the next thing. I was thinking based on my previous birth, where I felt like I did everything I could and then got an outcome that was very medically heavy. I thought, you know what, this pregnancy, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to study anything. So, when I realized that VBACs were kind of a big deal and you need to be a little bit ready and prepare yourself in your mind, and if anything, know how to deflect, doctors and anyone in the medical establishment who tries to dissuade you. So you need to be informed in that sense. I then was dealing with the baby was head up at 32 weeks. And then I went for my next visit and he was head down. And I was like, great, I can focus on all this VBAC information so that I can be informed and, walk in confident. And then the next visit, I went in and the ultrasound tech was like, oh, he's breech. And I got really confused. I was like, wait, what? He was head down a week ago. And she was like, no, he's frank breech. Very matter of fact, went into the doctors confused. And she was saying, yeah, he's breech. So you need to start thinking about scheduling a C-section, which I was not happy about and also confused about. But he was head down 2 weeks or a week ago. And that happened. So I felt like that took me away from being able to focus on the VBAC and feel relaxed. I think a big component of this is feeling relaxed enough that you're able to just go with the flow and let the baby come when he wants to come and all those things. So not only would like detracting me from being able to focus on the VBAC, but it was also just every time that would happen, I would have to think about how I'm not going to have a C-section because very few practitioners in LA want to give a breech birth, right? It's not really
Almost none.
yeah, there was just one practitioner that my friend used, but I believe he's no longer practicing. And yeah, my impression was that it just wasn't an option. So I wasn't able to focus on the VBAC. I had to focus on getting him back to being head down. So that happened a couple of times. I want to say every week between 34 and 39, he was moving around, right? So one week it was breech, one week it was head up, one week it was transverse. There was a lot of transverse. I was coming to see you every week, trying to get help to bring him head down. Then I'd go to my doctor's and he'd be head up, or he'd be head down again. Usually after our visits, he'd be head down, but then he'd move back. Also, I feel like it confused my confidence in what I felt because I thought I could feel his head a certain way, or then I thought I'd feel contractions. And I remember going to the doctors and she was like, oh, that wasn't contractions. That was probably him moving back to being head up. So I lost a lot of the confidence I had in my body and my connection to him at that point, which, obviously is a big deal when you're pregnant and trying to connect with your baby and trying to be intuitive, right, about how things are going. So that was going on. And then at 37 weeks, I think the previous week he was head down. I came in for a visit at 37 weeks and he was back to being head up. And she again insisted on, I think it was like 37 and 4 days or something for my visit. And she said, look, you need to schedule the C-section. Let's, work out when. And I asked her if I could do an ECV, which previously, every visit that I'd have where he was head up, I would ask for an ECV. And she said, no, I don't really do those for VBACs, which I guess she was afraid of opening the scar,
Right.
which I remember talking to you about. And you were saying that's not really something. And I spoke to
Well,
another.
just so many OBs in town don't consider that a contraindication,
Yeah. Well,
especially when your baby's flip-flopping all over the place by itself.
right. And one of the reasons we established he was flipping so much is because I had very high levels of fluids. I was like between about 23 to 25, which is the very utmost
Yeah, the
part
top
of
of
the
normal.
range. Because I have a sweet tooth anyway, but I had a really bad sweet tooth during pregnancy. So they told me, well, one of the ways you can, try and get your baby to stay head down is cutting sugar, which did not go down well for me.
Not your
I was
favorite thing.
like, I can't drink. I can't like drink like I can't, do all these things. Like this is all I have left. But okay. But at that point I was like, this matters more than my chocolate habit. So okay, I'll do what it takes through gritted teeth, especially like between Thanksgiving and Christmas when you're like at your most,
Everyone's eating, and you want
exactly.
to
And
too.
I was just, yeah, going to these Christmas parties, not that I had that many, but yeah, going to like Thanksgiving celebrations and just going, no, no to the desserts, which, yeah. But anyway, I told myself, like, it's just for a month.
Yeah, and then your doctor kind of came around to doing an ECB, right?
She did, yeah. So when I asked her for an ECV at 37 and a half weeks, she was like, you know what? He's transverse and his head is towards the bottom. So, okay, let's come in tomorrow. Do an ECV tomorrow. I wouldn't do it past 38 weeks, but because it's 37 plus 5, which kind of makes no sense in my mind. But yeah, okay. So I think I came in for a treatment with you that morning and then went for the ECV, which for people who haven't had an ECV, it's like you have to go to the hospital at 7:30 a.m. You have to pack your hospital bag. You get told like this could be the day this happens. If the ECV doesn't work, your baby might actually get delivered today. So that's already a huge shift in your mind. Well, in my mindset anyway, I was packing my hospital bag, thinking, well, this could be it, which is kind of crazy because at 37 and a half weeks, I didn't feel like it was going to be the moment. But I go in, they put you on a drip, like they do all these things, as if you're going through surgery. So you have to get there 2 hours ahead and you're getting all prepped. And then the doctor came in and she did the ultrasound ahead of the ECG, and she's like, "Oh, his head's down." Which was like, but I came in yesterday. But anyway, I was ecstatic. I was super
Wow.
happy at that point, obviously, because I was like, "Yay, I don't need to do an intervention."
And back on track for your feedback.
Exactly. And back on track for my VBAC. I was thinking I can finally focus on this VBAC now. Yeah, and lo and behold, the following week I go in and again he's head out or transverse. I think at that point, by that point he was more transverse. And at that point I was just like, you know what, this is just an exercise in resilience. I need to just let go of whatever I'm attached to. And I just felt again kind of defeated and kind of over just trying to make things happen my way. And then at the next ultrasound. So I agreed to schedule a C-section, and at the next ultrasound after that, he was head down again. So
I
yeah,
mean,
it's
what
just
an insane mental roller coaster.
it really was. And also I felt a little bit unsupported with the VBAC, just to wind back a little bit from my doctor. And I feel like I ended up almost like not having an argument with her, but kind of one day when he was actually head down. And she was like, okay, we can focus on this, but are you sure you want to have a VBAC? And I ended up just kind of being angry with her and telling her, look, I feel like all my energy isn't spent on navigating like VBACs, it's spent on navigating your requirements and what you're comfortable with and not comfortable with. And, I really want to walk in there feeling supported by my medical team. Like, I don't want to walk in there feeling like not only do I need to deal with childbirth, but I also need to navigate your anxieties as a doctor, right? Because she seemed almost more anxious than me about the VBAC. And I think from that point onwards, I think that was probably around 36 weeks. She apologized and she was really nice about it. And she said, okay, actually, I'm really sorry. This isn't at all the impression I want to give you. I want you to understand that my priority number one is your health and your baby's health. And, we're in this together. But from that point onwards, our relationship did shift a little bit. But then having said that, again, the baby was still flipping. I got a second opinion from Dr. Shavira, and he seemed really experienced in VBACs and a lot of the things boxes I take, which is advanced maternal age, quote unquote, VBACs, breech babies. So I contacted him, had a consult with him, and he was saying, okay, at this point, first, he completely put me back in confidence because at a certain point with my doctor, I started thinking, do I even want a VBAC? Like she was really scaremongering. And he really put me back in a good mental space with it. And the other thing is, he told me when I contacted him at 38 weeks saying, oh, my baby's head up again, he said, okay, well, after 39 weeks, if he is found to be head down, I would just induce then so that he,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that
that's not uncommon, with the flip-flopping.
yeah. And I was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Having said that, at 39 weeks, when he was head down, I tried to get a membrane sweep because I was like, okay, let's get things moving. And the doctor tried and she was like, look, he's so high up, you can't even do a membrane sweep. So there's no point.
That's also something that
Um,
happens with a large, generous swimming pool, a lot of fluid.
Really, yeah, because I brought my fluids down a little bit from not having sugar down to about 2022, but there was still a lot in there. So yeah, I
Still
still
a
have
generous swimming pool. One of the
exactly.
best on the block. Well, all right, but I mean, look, at least with a head down baby that close, you,
Yeah.
you have a shot
But that's,
again. And it sounds like with Dr. Shavira in your pocket, you have confidence again.
yeah.
So potential seems to be building.
Yeah, totally. I felt more confident, although at that point I felt like que sera, sera, that I couldn't control anything. And I felt like even if he was head down, the next appointment, I'd been through it so many times at that point. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen in the next appointment. So let's not get too excited either way.
For me, it was a roller coaster of emotions, and I was just there to support you. But, we were texting and email, and you're like, yep, head up, head down, head up, head down. You'd come
Yeah.
in, your baby would swim head down, and, you'd leave, and I'm like, okay, she's good. And then all of a sudden, head up, a day
Yeah.
later. For me, it was intense. And, you're a lovely person. I really feel honored to work with you, and I want things to go great for you. But as much as I want that for you, like, I cannot begin to imagine. I was actually very, very impressed by how overall level-headed you stayed with everything, spiking the peaks and valleys that you went through. I do want to take one more break and then when we come back, we'll find out how this birth actually went down. Welcome back. Well, if you enjoy roller coasters, then you're enjoying Isabelle's birth story. And at the end, the baby is head down. You try to get a membrane sweep. They can't even reach your cervix. So what happens next?
Right. So at that point, I went home. That was a Friday. This is a Friday before Christmas. I thought, okay. And at that point, I was doing everything I could. I was walking like maybe 15,000 steps a day, just doing all the exercises that I like, yeah, everything that I could to keep him head down and to try and induce him naturally. Because I was like, okay, he's head down now. Let's just try and, get things moving. And then I had another appointment on the Monday for just a fetal monitoring appointment again, and just to see where he was at that point, because who knows? And so I went in, but I also thought I might get induced based on what Dr. Shavir had said. I thought, well, I'm like 39 plus 4 at that point. So, as Dr. Shavir said, if he's head down, I should just get induced. But I was really trying to talk myself into it. I was not really ready for him to come mentally. I was obviously ready, but I just didn't feel like that was the moment. But I was just trying to go like, yeah, this is it. This is the day. Yay.
You weren't feeling it.
Yeah, I wasn't feeling it. But go to hospital, get checked, and try and get a membrane sweep. And again, the doctor's like, I can't do a membrane sweep. He's too high. He's lower, but he's still too high. This is not going to go how you want it to go if we do this. So I can't even touch it anyway. So there's no point in getting induced. And so she sent me home, and I got really weirdly, even though that's not what I wanted, I got really emotional about it. I got home. My husband sent our toddler away with her granddad and her grandma to Long Beach, where they live. So it was just the two of us, and I just couldn't stop crying. I was really upset that I hadn't been induced, even though that's not what I wanted. I just had this huge surge of emotion. Don't get me wrong, I'd been emotional for a lot of this. You were talking about being level-headed. Like, I did not feel level-headed at all. I felt completely all over the place for the last 2 months, but, I just got on with it, I guess. But yeah, I just felt like it was like a huge release of emotion, and I was just really upset. I don't know why, that I hadn't been induced, because I think I just tried to pressure myself to mentally be ready for it. And then when it didn't happen, I was like, oh my God, another week. And also I just felt so huge for, like you feel like your last weeks of pregnancy and having all that fluid. So yeah, got really upset, didn't sleep. And the next day was Christmas Eve, went to pick up our toddler in Long Beach, had like a kind of mini Christmas dinner with my husband's family. And I just felt during the day, I kept feeling contractions, but because I'd completely lost, not completely, but I feel like I'd lost confidence in my ability to read my body, because I kept telling my doctor, oh, she was asking me all along if you had contractions, and I was telling her I feel contractions, but they last like 5 to 10 minutes, and she was saying, well, that's not a contraction then, that's probably something else. So I felt these things that day in particular. I was walking around with my husband. We did a really, really long walk, like maybe 10 miles along the beach, to the point I was completely exhausted, but I was just feeling all these things. But then I was like, well, I don't know what it is. Who knows? At that point, I don't really know. And then that night at this dinner, again, I just felt really strong contractions. But then I was like, again, I don't know. Maybe this is a good sign, but what do I know? Almost, came back with our toddler and put her to bed, and we're watching television. And at that point, I was just feeling like really intense contractions. And I was on my birth ball kind of furiously trying to relax. And I was just like, okay, well, we just brought our toddler back from Long Beach because we didn't think it was going to happen anytime soon. So I can't go to hospital now, even though I really felt like I probably should. And I was like, well, also, I was at the doctor's yesterday, and she told me it wasn't going to happen, because she couldn't even sweep my membranes. Like, this isn't going to happen now. So I just need to calm down, and I'm going to go to bed. And if I keep feeling like this, I'll just drive to hospital tomorrow. But I can't go now because we just picked our toddler up. And, I can't have my father-in-law drive all the way back to pick her up again 2 days in a row. So I'm bouncing on the birth ball, and my husband is sitting there with me, and all of a sudden at 9:30 my waters broke. I just felt like a huge gush,
Oh,
and I was
wow.
like, oh my God, oh my God. And Christmas Eve, and I stand up, and there's just like so much fluid that comes out, and also some blood, which was very disconcerting to me because I did not know that in your amniotic fluids can have blood. So that immediately
Oh,
was
so
quite
you got
scary for me.
nervous. Hmm.
Yeah, it was quite scary because I didn't know that piece of information that sometimes, I don't know if it's all the time, but it can be a thing. But I got really scared. Also, I was thinking, well, it's Christmas Eve. I could call my doctor, but I know that the switchboard goes, if it's an emergency, call 911. And then, based on experience, after that, it sends you through to the doctor who's on call, but it takes like 5 minutes on the switchboards to get you to the doctor on call. And I was like, I don't have 5 minutes right now. I'm like, gushing out blood and water. And yeah, I didn't feel confident waiting. So I called 911, and the fire department came over within about 5 minutes.
Wow, you don't know how to just have a baby without
Very
drama.
dramatic. It was very dramatic. And it was Christmas Eve. And it was just crazy. And they all arrived, and they're like, checking me, checking the baby's not crowning. Luckily not. And then they said, well, you need to go to hospital now. And yeah, so it was kind of funny actually, because when they arrived, I was like, yeah, my water's broken. There was lots of blood. And they said, where? And my husband, bless him, he didn't really know how to deal with this. So he took the mop out. He was like furiously mopping under me. So there was nothing there except what was still coming out in gushes. And yeah, they got a little confused, but we're like, no, it was there, but it's just been mopped up. And he was mopping as I talked. So it was kind of a funny scene. But yeah, everything was fine. I got to the hospital, everything was fine. Got admitted to labor and delivery and spent the night there. And yeah, I got told I was 1.5 when I arrived. Got an epidural because it was getting increasingly painful. And initially I thought I'm not going to take any medication again. But I'd spoken to a friend who'd got induced, and she told me, I took an epidural because it really helped me sleep. And at that point, I was so exhausted because I hadn't slept the night before. I was like, you know what? It's not going to come in my favor if I don't do this. If I try and be a hero and not take an epidural and try and, deal with this throughout the night, I just feel so tired already, and I'm only 1.5 centimeters. It's just not going to work in my favor. So I got an epidural, and I was able to just really relax and sleep and listening to meditations. In fact, I listened to your birth meditation
Huh.
like throughout the night, like about 50 times. And I was listening to sounds of the ocean and just going in and out. And it was actually amazing. It was really beautiful. It was like a psychedelic journey. I want to describe it for me, that part of labor. I really, really just loved it, being like half awake, half asleep, and just feeling my baby, working through it together. It was really amazing. And the other amazing thing that happened, a doctor called Dr. Fabi.
Yeah.
It was like a kind of holistic,
Yeah, very sort of like a midwife
yeah.
OB.
So she was like my dream doctor, but I wasn't able to get her. But I'd heard a lot about her, and I always thought I was very much aligned with her principles of natural birth, like, just her principles. And I'd never met her. I tried to have a consult with her when the baby was flip-flopping, but I was too far down, and I think she has quite a long wait list. And lo and behold, in the middle of the night, when I get checked once, they said you need to get a UPCI or a
Oh,
PCUI.
yeah, to monitor the pressure, like an internal
Right. Yeah, exactly. At
monitor.
about 6 a.m., they said, okay, you haven't really dilated much, so you need to get a Pitocin, and we need to put one of these in. And I was kind of like in my head going, ooh, like intervention, intervention. And I was like, no, just calm down. Like, okay, let's just do this. It's fine. I've got it. I've got it under, it's fine. So I said, okay. And lo and behold, Dr. Fabi walks in, and she's like, hi, I'm Dr. Fabi.
Oh, so she came to your birth anyway.
I had no idea that she worked at the hospital where I gave birth, and I was
As a
so
hospitalist.
ecstatic. I was just like, "Oh my God." Like I feel like I probably scared her away. I was like, "Oh my God, I love you. I know you." And she was a bit like, "Oh, hi." Anyway, she was amazing. She was really, all the doctors, I will say, that I saw during that birth were really wonderful because there were the doctors on call because it was Christmas. Yeah, and she was like, oh, you're already 3 centimeters. Like, you're totally going to do this. It's totally fine. You've got it. And fitted the little instrument and just left. And I was just texting my friend at that moment, who's one of her clients. And I was just, this is unreal. I was texting her a minute before she walked in. And I was like, oh my God, Dr. Fabi just walked in. And that just said, yeah, I felt like it was also just another magical moment for me. Carried on, and then I was just progressing really well. Like every time they'd check me, they were like, okay, you're 5, you're 6, just carry on, relax. And I would just carry on and relax. And then at about midday, I guess like around 1 or 2, finally the nurse came in, and the last check they'd given me was about 8 or 9. And I was like, I just feel different. Like, can you check me? And she said, well, we're not supposed to check you for another half hour, but I can if you want. And I said, yes, please do, because I feel different. And she checked and she said, oh, you're complete. We can start the pushing
Oh my
phase.
goodness.
So, yeah, I was so happy. It was really just an amazing experience, that labor.
How
And
did
then
pushing go?
it went fine. It was an hour. It was my favorite part, but yeah, we got through it. And then the baby came out and he was healthy, I think like 8 pounds 10 or something like that. Yeah, that's the other thing, is all along they kept telling me all through the pregnancy, oh, he's in the 99th percentile. He's like a huge baby. He's going to be, 10 pounds, whatever. And he was 8 pounds 10. Even one of the nurses, who was
Hmm.
actually amazing, but she was like, okay, let's get this giant baby out. Like, can you not say that? Like, just that. But yeah, he was healthy. He was just fine. I mean, he was beautiful. Everything was great. So,
Okay, well now there was a big payoff because now I have all sorts of tingles going through my body. I
uh,
mean, what was that moment like when you
it
pushed the
was
baby out and held your
it was
baby?
so special. It was really amazing. And yeah, I just kind of felt also like, oh, was that it? I felt like, I don't know. I just felt like after like my experience with the first one, it had become such a huge thing that I just thought there was all this like huge amount of pain involved and then overwhelming. And then I just thought, actually, once it was done, I felt like the pushing phase was actually pretty short, not short, but not too long. And I was just proud and happy. Yeah.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
As we're winding down, like, what's your takeaway from your experiences?
I mean, my
Message.
takeaway is, if you want something to just carry on trucking through for a VBAC, just carry on, like, inform yourself, and also just carry on believing, because I feel like I had a lot of the flip-flopping and being advanced maternal age and having a doctor that wasn't really holistically minded, and all these things felt like a little bit stacked against me. But, if you think you can do it, it's not going to work every time. I'm not under any illusion, but at the same time, I feel like at a certain point, it was letting go and believing that you can do it, and just trying to do all the little steps that you can to make it happen your way. And then after that point, you just have to let it go and let it happen how it's going to happen.
Well said. I feel honored to have been a part of your journey,
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks
and
for all your help.
my pleasure. And thank you for joining us and sharing your story. The ups and downs and the persistence it's inspiring.
Well,
And I think a lot of elements of your story will relate to people who listen to the podcast. And your takeaway message to get informed is also wonderful. I wish there was some kind of podcast that could help with that.
I don't know. I'll have to think, come back.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. At home, thanks for listening to the Informed Pregnancy Podcast. For more pregnancy and parenting information just like this, visit us online at informedpregnancy.com.